Hi, welcome. We are here today to talk about James Goldberg, who is receiving the 2026 award for the Smith-Pettit Foundation Award for Outstanding Contribution to Mormon Letters. Not only is he receiving it, this is also the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Association for Mormon Letters. And who better to receive this award in such a special year than James Goldberg? We're going to get a lot into James and who he is, just as a very brief. He's won many awards from the Association for Mormon Letters, including last year's Best Novel Award for the Kelm First Award, and he's won it many other times and been nominated many other times. He is a historian. He is a television personality. He is a writer. He is both of fiction, essays, poetry, plays. He does it all. And he's contributed in many ways to the community of Mormon literature. So here today, we have four of us that are going to talk about James and his work and his contributions. So I'll just give a few brief introductions. So first, we have Edward Whitley. He's the professor and chair of English at, oh, now I don't know how to say it. You're going to have to save me.
You know how to say it.
Lehigh?
That's it.
Okay, this is the right, you are at the right university. You won on the University for Mormon Literature. You won on the university. At Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. You won double because you're in Bethlehem. He's the author or editor of four books on the poet Walt Whitman, including the upcoming Norton Library edition of Leaves of Grass, which is actually already on my Goodreads to read list. So I'm excited for this. Next up, we have Christopher Cannon Jones. He is an assistant professor of history at Brigham Young University, and he's the editor of the Journal of Mormon History. He's also the author of the forthcoming Methodist Connections, Early American Religion in the Revolutionary Atlantic World, and co-editor of Missionary Interests, Protestant and Mormon Missions in the 19th and 20th Centuries. Next up, we've got Rafael Vásquez. His pen name is R. de la Lanza. If you've been following short Mormon literature, you have seen his work in many places. He is the author also of the novel Eloisis. We're going to go with that. And it won the 2020 special 2022 prize given by the Association for Mormon Letters as the best LDS themed romance or novel romance being the word in Spanish, the best LDS themed novel written in a language other than English. It follows the life of four generations of Latter-day Saints in Mexico City. Raphael runs the literary training workshop whose students are primarily LDS. And I'm going to butcher Spanish for everyone to hear forever on the internet. Taller de Formación Literaria is the workshop that he runs. And I am Katherine Cowley. I'm the award-winning author of The Secret Life of Miss Mary Bennett trilogy. I've also been nominated for the Pushcart Prize, and I have works published anywhere that you can publish short Mormon fiction. I have published short Mormon fiction there. So let's get to talking about James Goldberg, who is the real reason we are all here today. And all of us have different experiences with James. All of us have been interacting with him and following his career for quite some time. And I think this is a really interesting award to for James to receive because it's meant to honor kind of a wealth of contributions to Mormon Letters. And also a few years ago, it was switched to honor people who are mid-career, who this is not a lifetime achievement, you're done. No, we expect, if we give out this award, we expect someone to continue to do great things. It's not you've done it, you can sit on your accolades. It's you've done that a lot, and we want you to do more, which I'm sure we all feel this way about James. So I just wanted us to start by talking a little bit about maybe where he's most well known, which is his contributions to the field of history, which is not, we have the Mormon History Association. They were great friends with them. But we're Association for, Mormon Letters, but they're friendly fields, and we'll talk later about the connections. But let's start first talking about his kind of contributions historically. Many people know James from the BYU TV program Come Follow Up. He was a host on, I believe, 32 episodes, if I counted correctly, which is, quite some time. He was one of the authors of Saints and I believe Saints Volume 2. So let's start with some of his historical contributions. Christopher, could you start us off with kind of what are some of the things that James has, participated in? How has he contributed as a historian?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will begin by expressing my surprise that you think or that you sort of said that he is perhaps best well known as a historian, because I've never quite thought of him as a historian, in spite of his very real contributions to the field of Mormon history. I think of James very much as a literary guy, as a poet, as an author, as a writer. Uh, but I feel like his biggest contributions to Mormon history have been from that decidedly more literary background. He was brought on to help with the writing of Saints because he's such an excellent writer, right? The church employs a number of fantastic historians who are capable of doing the research. But we are not always perhaps the best writers in terms of addressing public or broader audiences. And so I feel like that's where James's real strengths lie. I think about his biography, Latter-day Sikh, about I'm gonna not have the name now. Oh, let's see here. Gurcharan Singh Gill, about his conversion to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and his life there afterwards, becoming India's first mission president and sort of an advocate for Indian family history work. I think about his co-authored volume with Artist Partial. Oh my gosh, why am I forgetting all of the names of these books now? Song of Names, a Mormon Mosaic, in which James and Artist, the late Artist Partial, one of James's very close friends, um, took really fantastic and little known episodes from the Latter-day Saint past and shared them with the public in a series of poems uncovering their lives. And I think that book, perhaps more than anything else, gets at James's central contribution to Mormon history, and that is that no individual life was too small, no individual episode in the past was too insignificant for him. That he believed that that formed the core of the Mormon past, the individual lives of its members, of its detractors, of its critics, of its sometimes members, and everywhere in between. That to James was, and I think is, the story of the Mormon people, as opposed to the story of an institutional church or its leaders. And so anytime James participated in Mormon history, it was always with an eye towards the lesser known lives of Latter-day Saints. And that's what I always think of when I think of James's contributions to the study of Mormon history.
I do remember James once told me, he's like, everyone else in the church history department are actual historians. He's like, but I'm a storyteller. Which, I mean, it's interesting, in English, history and story, the words are connected.
Yeah.
But his focus, he's like, there are people that are much better than at the actual research than I am, but I hope that I can tell these stories in a way that people can connect to.
I think that's right. And I do want to be careful. I don't want to underplay James's research or abilities as a historical researcher, right? He certainly has those chops. He and I first met while we were undergraduate research assistants at BYU for the Joseph Smith papers, and he was down in the archives getting his fingers dusty and dirty alongside the rest of us aspiring historians at the time. He just decided to sort of pursue professional paths that allowed him to learn to write much better than the rest of us.
I mean, I think it's interesting, because I think where we kind of, everyone in the church has heard of saints. and many, many people in the church watch Come Follow Up on and watch BYU TV. The Mormon literature community has often felt a little bit on the fringes. There's very little, for example, fiction ever published in magazines. Now, actually, historically in the church, you go back to the 1880s and 1890s, you can find it. In recent decades, there's very little official, fiction publications. The work that you mentioned, Latter-day Saint, was actually published by Deseret Book. And so, you can go find that in a Deseret Book anywhere. So some of his historical things might be more obvious maybe to a general Mormon audience, is more likely to heard of him. But if anyone's in the Mormon literature field, they know who James is. And I feel like, he's probably a bigger player, he's a bigger fish in the Mormon literature pond, perhaps, than in the history pond, even though, what he's doing in the history is so important. Like, I teach early morning seminary, and I'll pull up these articles, and I'm like, oh, and this one was also written by James, or this video was also worked on by James. And one of the things I admire is both what you talked about, Christopher, of these small stories, but also the ability to deal with difficult things, which is, I think, something that he brings from literature. Literature, whether it's poetry or essay or fiction, is also often about dealing with these struggles and this sense of, like, well, how do you deal with the fact that the bank failed in Nauvoo and it was partially Joseph Smith's fault, or that saints actually attacked some people in Missouri? And the way that James seems to have approached it, as I've followed his historical contributions and telling these stories, is, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's include that in part of the story, not in an attempt to, you know, say church members were terrible, but say, yeah, church members made mistakes, or we're not perfect. And here's the context, and here's how we understand this, and here's how we move forward with this. Any other thoughts that you guys have? We can come back to history later, but on kind of this historical contributions. One of the things I love with the Come Follow Up and with other things James has written about scriptures is just how he manages to bring whatever it is alive, whether it's a scripture story or a history, someone's story from history, whether it's in saints or a shorter form. Yes, Raphael.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I've watched almost every chapter of follow up podcast or program. James is a great storyteller, but he is also a great insight found seeker. He's always telling insights from other point than what we are like usually go through. He sets the camera over the gospel topics from another point of view, and that's a great thing he does, since he does even when he's telling a story that everybody knows. And he's always looking for stories. He's always looking for stories. When he came to Mexico, he was in our ward meetings, and he was listening to the people that were testimony and in the priesthood class, and he hey, this is a great story because that and he told me an insight, spiritual insights, storytelling insights, literary insights, or even just personal insights. So he is a great storyteller in the main way to mean it. So that's what about his skills or his talent or his gift as a story man or history man is James Goldberg for me.
I think it's interesting. One of his books, The Five Books of Jesus, is a novelization of Jesus's life. And he talked about the point of view that he used in that novel as a donut hole omniscience, in that you get everyone's point of view. You can dip into everyone's heads and their perspective and their experiences except for Jesus's. And he's the main character of this book. And as you read this, it's just brilliant as you're with Mary, or you're betraying Jesus, or you're with the governor, or you're with all of these people, and their stories come alive. And it was just a really interesting literary choice to choose full omniscience, except for Jesus. That he's a storyteller, and he has, as you talked about, Raphael, this very like this grasp of point of view and how to not just point of view in the traditional, like, how we talk about teach it in elementary and middle and high school sense of like, well, these are the three you can choose from, guys, but just this sense of what perspective will connect us to these stories. What perspectives have we not seen in these things that are sometimes so very familiar to us? Let's talk a little bit about his poetry in terms of this. Ed, if you could just talk about your research in the history of Mormon poetry and what you found when you discovered what it was like to discover James's poetry in that
Yeah,
context.
happy to do that. Before I do that, I want to transition from a poem about history, and I've asked you if I can share my screen from time to time, just so that readers can have these poems. Are you seeing Joseph Sr., circa 1812?
Yes.
So this poem, I was crying a couple hours ago reading this because 1 month from today, I will be at the Joseph Smith birthplace in Vermont with the young men of my stake for our Aaronic priesthood camp. And we are actively thinking, how do we tell the stories about this place? And it's not the sacred grove, it's not the priesthood restoration site. If you've been to the Joseph Smith birthplace, you see it's a few foundations from two homes, and there's not much there. And what James has found in this poem is really representative of what he does in so much of his excavations of scriptural history and Latter-day Saint history, is finding multiple stories in an unexpected place. So I'll read through this. It's short if I can. It says, "In the spring he sows hope, but come fall he reaps only the empty wind. So all through the long Vermont winter, there's a bottle in his hand." And there's Joseph Sr.'s alcoholism, which we do not talk about, but it's there. He drinks like Noah, whose alcoholism we don't talk about, but it's there. He drinks like Noah to drown a flood's worth of sorrows, drinks until he staggers to and fro, as the earth itself will in the end. And the feeling I got, I was up in the birthplace in Vermont last month, and the big impression I had was how were these hardy New Englanders scraping out an existence? What ambition, optimism did they have to be able to carve out a land, and what heartbreak came in trying to do that? And then we have the pivot to a much more familiar Latter-day Saint story. This is how I understand that story where his son, infection arching through the bone, turns down the surgeon's offer of anesthetizing liquor. "I don't need that," the boy says to his father. "I just need you." This is a story that we read as like a proto word of wisdom, like, Joseph was living the word of wisdom before it had even been revealed. And here, James has found another story at the heart of this story about this family. So that is one of the things that I value so much about James as a poet, the way that he's able to find these nuggets in Latter-day Saint history and biblical history. And I was fortunate enough to find James, to discover him after I'd done a massive research project about Book of Mormon poetry, which has been written since 1830 on by Latter-day Saints, non-Latter-day Saints alike, other branches of the Latter-day Saint movement. And I was going through a lot of books like Out of the Dust by Vernon Larson and Book of Mormon Pioneers, and found a trend that we love to focus on the epic journey of Lehi's family or the tragic elegy of Moroni. So the vast majority of Book of Mormon poetry is in the first 30 pages of the book and the last 30 pages. And we love these ideas of a civilization growing and then kind of mourning alongside this last man. And so that essay was published in 2019, and in 2020, I can't even remember, I stumbled across this online. I guess I have the right Latter-day Saint social media friends. This is from James' Book of Lamentations. And I won't read through it. I'll leave it up on the screen so folks that are watching at home, you can pause and read through this on your own. But it's a poem that, again, takes that familiar story that we know. The Book of Mormon was written for our day, And it says something that is completely unconventional in the history of Book of Mormon poetry, what it chooses to focus on, how it stays away from like the epic triumph of building a civilization or the kind of maudlin elegy of sometimes unsubstantiated emotion that we give to that final decline of Moroni wandering in the wilderness. Again, I'll leave this for readers to pause and read on their own. But James' ability to find new stories among familiar stories, whether it's in history or poetry, it's remarkable.
I mean, I do think it's interesting, for example, I'll go back to Song of Names, which we've mentioned, which is as we said before, it's a beautiful melody, melding, you've got these essays, you have poetry, you have art, a true collaboration. And he also plays with poetic form here. You have some of the very set forms, like the villanelles, we kind of don't write in very often because we're like, you can't really write good poetry on that anymore. Like there's better things we could do. But he takes, like, for example, a story of one I really like is William and Marie Graves and the historical context where we have these African American Latter-day Saints who are living the gospel even though they don't have the opportunity to participate in temple ordinances. They can't participate fully. And they travel to Atlanta, Georgia, and decide to bring a friend to church as they visit a ward, and they basically get asked to leave. And so, it's this melding of history of just how it takes, and then it takes the villanelle form, which repeats different parts at different places in this form, and it just plays with it. I'll just read a little bit of it, not the whole thing. We found the right church, all right, but found the wrong people, she said. In Atlanta, they wanted her skin white. She left the place quiet, avoided a fight, but had to admit to the friends she'd led. We found the right church, all right. And then it, talks about kind of playing with these phrases that she wrote down and putting them in a villanelle and then ending with a phrase that she also wrote, about hope. We found the right church, all right, and when the day came, they'd be buried in white. And this sense of this hope for the temple covenants, and that this kind of, despite this, and so we take something, this kind of very tragic, not just moment, but era in church history of, and, you know, James once again manages to tell it in a way that makes us see it differently, that makes us focus on the individual, that makes us gain new insights for ourselves. How, Ed, is James's poetry different or the same or than other, poetry, this very long history of poetry?
So I was revisiting, Harvest, this collection from 1989 that Eugene England and Dennis Clark put together. This was brand new when I was an undergraduate. That's how old I am. And revisiting this and seeing how many of James's poems would fit neatly, right, in this volume that's 35 years old now, if I'm doing my math correctly. That it's aware of that tradition and that initial flowering of Latter-day Saint literature under Eugene England and Emma Luthane and other folks at that period. Um, there's also, let me see if I can pull this one up. Another one of James's poems that's well known that I believe I remember on a podcast he read this one that makes me think about his relationship to a Latter-day Saint history that is somewhat different. I'm scrolling through my PDF. Thank you for your patience. I had it queued up and then
The problem with James's things is I'm like, wait, I've got this one and I have to hold this book
no.
and I have to hold this book and then I've got the ones on the Kindle and I have to switch back and forth. There's just this
Mhm.
huge breadth to his work, and then you start getting to the essays published online and all the things that are in different spots. That
And
there's just so much that we could talk about, so many poems to get through.
here's a quick one we can look at. This is The Builders, and this is thinking about Latter-day Saint history as if it were a house. Let's say it took 60 years for the first generation to lay a foundation for this faith we share. another 60 for those who came after to raise up the walls of practice that protect us. That puts us around 1950, when the builders climbed up on the first planks of the roof, got a chance to look out and take in the view of a wide open world, which makes it 2010, another 60 years later, when the roof is in good solid shape and my friends start jumping off. There's a dark turn there at the end that reflects a lot of the moment that we're in, of turning away from religion in general, a lot of disaffiliation among Latter-day Saints. A lot of our brothers and sisters are becoming cousins, which is great. We love cousins, but they don't want to participate in full fellowship in the church. And James registers that loss. He registers that history. And as I was thinking about what's his relationship to some of this poetry from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was flowering in the early days of dialogue and Sunstone. It has a similar energy, excitement about all the different things that you can do as a Latter-day Saint. But he's also aware of some of the darkness. And in the Book of Lamentations in particular, he doesn't shy away from some of that dark edge.
Do any of you guys want to comment on this, Christopher or Raphael? Just like, how does James deal with kind of the darkness in his works of any genre or type? Raphael.
I was thinking about one text that I found it is, and the title is the White Jesus Problem. I don't know if you've gone
Yeah, like that. I think
through.
that the essay might be Why I Hate White Jesus or something like that.
He he's telling um,
Okay, have we lost you, Raphael?
a lot, like going through, like telling this. I'm sorry. The,
Could you start over your
am I
thought? I
there?
think we can hear you now. It just flipped out for a minute. So if you could start over your thought
Um,
on that essay.
okay. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. Uh, um, I was reminded of this text of uh, James. My problem with the white Jesus, or the problem of the white Jesus, if I am connected right now. Am I with you?
Yes.
Maybe it would be better for you, for us to if I can see what's happening here. So please, if someone of you want to tell anything, maybe it would be better, because I don't know if something is happening to my wife.
We can hear you, so keep talking.
Okay. Sorry. Um, he wrote a text about the how artists portrays Jesus as a white man, and he tells a lot about his roots. Much of it, I'm sure, is in his recent book, the Latter-day Sick. But I can find the first big manifesto about the feelings he has on all the racist problems that we go through, that almost everyone, even the church, even in the BYU, and all those experiences, like are molding his heart, and those experiences are the darkness itself, I think. And he's a hero in the sense that he deals with darkness in a very royal and hero way. he always has this sight, this look over the situations, and he doesn't deny the evil or the dark, but he knows the limits of its power, the limits of the power of the evil, the limits of the power of the darkness, and he can he can see the boundaries of all of it, and works from that and tells everything that comes from his heart or his mind, uh, from that perspective. I think that I'm coming again to this point, his perspective. So that's what that impresses me a lot, because I deal with this racist side. Even when I live in Mexico, there is some. It is not like the way racism is experienced in the U.S., but there is a way, a specific way to live it here, and it is a hard thing to go through. And when I read this article of James, it gave me another sight from the that wasn't uh, too literary. It was like an essay on social matters, and social and anthropologic stuff, and he did great. Sorry for the inconvenience.
No worries. Yeah, I'm glad we got you back though, and you were able to kind of tell your experience with that, as I say. Yeah, I think that sometimes you look at kind of historical, Mormon literature, the type of, maybe it's not, whether or not it's literature maybe is irrelevant, the sort of LDS related content I was consuming, for example, as a teenager. And there was a trend, at least when I was consuming this in the 90s and early 2000s, of, very sanitized maybe stories, and very just like, oh, like everything is good, everything is fine, and everything, like, yes, we have challenges, but we're going to keep them within these little boxes. So they're only, like, will you make the friend at girls camp? Not your parents are going through divorce. Like that's not an acceptable girls' camp story. That's too hard. And I do love how he's able to, whether in that essay, Why I Hate White Jesus, or, he had a recent LDS Living article that James published about undergoing cancer treatments and stuff, of just that he goes through some of these very hard experiences, and then whether they're from like about his own personal life, or whether his own personal life and his own perspective is able to inform outside experiences, that sense of perspective that maybe other people don't have. Like, it's not just a helpful perspective. It's not just lecturing, you should be better and not be racist. No, it's a lot more kind of nuanced and in depth, and also can draw you in maybe a lot deeper.
Can I share
Yeah.
another poem? Oh, go ahead. I'll let Christopher go first.
Ed, please go.
This is a short one. It's also about race, tremendously powerful. And when that morning comes, when Elijah Abel raises Brigham Young from the dead, he'll put his perfect black hands on that old prophet's head. He'll call out in Jesus' name for those bleached bones to walk when he goes to Brigham's grave and finally rolls aside the rock. For the master of the priesthood said the first would be the last, and then all would be forgiven what they'd done in the past. And Katherine, this makes you think about your earlier comment about the complex forms that James works in. Listen to how folksy this is, right? This is a half step away from a ballad, delivering a hard, important, difficult message, but with a cadence that's very familiar. Go ahead, Christopher. Thanks for your patience.
Well, I was just gonna, again, as everybody here knows, I'm not a literary scholar. I'm not a poet. I'm not a literary critic. When you were discussing earlier, Catherine, the villanelle form of poetry that James utilizes occasionally, I have no idea what you're talking about. Just to sort of put this as as clear as possible. But I do know, and I did pick up on in that book, A Song of Names, that he experiments with different types and forms of poetry, often tailored to the people that he is describing or the experiences that he's describing. And so, in addition to race, he talks about migration, he talks about war, he talks about mental health and institutionalization and the way that a church community responds to that. I think about I mean, maybe a little known, or maybe it's better known, I don't know, but perhaps my favorite piece of Latter-day Saint history or historical work that James has ever done is something that he, again, I think he collaborated with artist Partial on. And it was an online exhibit that the church published, gosh, 6 or 7, maybe 8 years ago, maybe longer, a decade ago now, about this exodus of Armenian saints during the genocide happening there. And he traces the story of these saints, including a little known woman named Yerenik Gedikian, who sort of assumes a leading role in this as they travel from modern day Turkey to modern day Syria. And it's really a fascinating story where they literally travel in covered wagons. So it's almost mimicking this 19th century Latter-day Saint Exodus. And it's this really powerful story that deals with death and genocide. It deals with migration. It deals with politics. It deals with discrimination. It deals with sexism. It's all right there, and this was something that the church published, and James just masterfully does this. He takes this research, these really fascinating stories, and he knows how to tell that story, right? So sometimes he tells that story through poetry. Sometimes he tells that story through more straightforward storytelling. Sometimes he tells that through, humorous short stories and fiction, like in the Kelm First Ward, just a really fantastic, delightful sort of a collection of stories there. But he knows his audience and he knows how to communicate to that audience in ways that are going to have them be receptive to what he's sharing, right? In a way that I, as a historian, if I said, look, I've published this great article in the Journal of Mormon History on these Armenian saints, yeah, a handful of other historians is going to read that, and that'll be wonderful, and I'll feel good about myself. But James is able to take that story, to take that research, and turn it into something that is tangible, that is interesting, that is engaging, that still manages to sort of convey important lessons, some not didactic lessons, but to sort of sit in the discomfort of episodes in the past and the present of Latter-day Saint culture and beyond. Um, it's really sort of an incredible talent or ability that he has to do that. Um, anyway, thank you.
I mean, I'm just bringing up this book that you just referenced, Tales of the Kelm First Word. I mean, it is interesting to take, many of the people that have won this award in the past are very clearly mostly in one lane. They are a poet, or they are a playwright, or they are a novelist. And James is everything. James does it all because he moves between forms in a way, just that like whatever form is best for what it is, what story he wants to tell, he will use that form. He will master that form. And it will be one of the best things there is from that form. So, Kelm First Word is actually taking kind of a Jewish storytelling tradition of, which is actually part of his heritage as well, of a village of idiots. And except we're in this village of idiots and there is a ward there and they're church members. And, so for example, one of the stories within this novel is 2 Hour Church. And, one of the characters says, there have been, this has happened, with the switch to 2 Hour Church. There have been many questions and speculations about the change from a 3 hour to a 2 hour schedule. And, he's read the instructions in English, not just, as well as in Polish, so he knows he can talk about this. The hope of the brothers in America, he explained, is not simply to reduce the cost of heating this building during the winter or the amount of time we spend with the scriptures. The real purpose is to increase the time we spend with our families, or rather, he added hastily, the time that those of you who live with families spend with your families. But rest assured, the time you spend with your family will benefit me as well. The family, as we all know, is the fundamentalist unit of society. And it goes on, and we have this Sunday school teacher who is devastated of how little time he actually gets in Sunday school. And we have these people studying, and like, what is what is increase? What is sacrifice? What's the point? What's the point of Sunday school in general? And it's told in this, very comedic manner, and yet it hits on these things, these questions, these struggles, these triumphs that we actually have in the church, by making it just so very real, even though it's a situation that is not ours, but is exactly ours.
Katherine, you're making me think James needs to write a haiku about 25-minute Sunday school. Once that starts this fall, we need to know, how do you get it in 575 syllables?
I'm actually working on a short story right now inspired by this whole thing because which actually brings me to something else that I want to talk about. Is so we could actually talk for 3 more hours about James's literary contributions, and we will get back to this, but I also wanted to talk about his work as a community builder. I can honestly say that I would never have written any Mormon fiction or essays if it weren't for James. Literally zero. And I have stories published in Mormon Blitz and Segula and Dialogue and um there's another one. Anyways, and so, but one thing I wanted to know is, for example, 15 years ago, this is actually the 15th anniversary of the Mormon Lit Blitz, which is a contest started by him and his wife, Nicole. And originally, Scott Hales was involved in the project as well. And James has carried this forward through 15 years. He then turns from just the Mormon Lit Lab, and then originally there was Everyday Mormon Writer or Mormon Lit Blitz, to the Mormon Lit Lab, so a larger nonprofit organization, and now he's doing workshops for novelists writing in the Mormon field. But from what I've seen, like I personally would not be writing Mormon fiction without this sense of there's an audience and there's a place for it, and there's a place for other types of Mormon fiction than maybe what you've seen before. And so, from my perspective, we've seen a blossoming of short Mormon fiction and poetry and essays in the last 15 years, in part because of James's work in the Mormon Lit Blitz. And of course, there have been so many other people who have contributed to so many other organizations. We have Erie Anthem through Association for Mormon Letters. We have all these things. But let's talk a little bit about James's community building and his work with other writers and other organizations to help other writers succeed. Rafael, do you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you. Well, James is like the founder of communities. Being a writer is such a like solitary thing, um, and being a Mormon writer is just like being a little bit more lonely. And being a Mormon writer for Mormon audiences is just at least in Hispanic America, reality is like being a little bit more alone in the darkness or in the desert. But he came with this that you said. He tells you that there is the audience, there is, and they are longing to know the stories more than reading your writing to connect, because we all know that telling stories and telling the story or the history is a thing of connection, and he does what it takes to get you to know other people, to meet other people. And I was looking at my email inbox, and most of James's communications are, "Hey, Katherine, this is Rafael. Hey, Dad, this is Rafael, and he's doing this. Hey, he's like telling other people about you." And that's a big thing that you can't find in any other literary effort, because almost everyone is like, "I am a writer, and I am a writer, and I do my things, and hey, what are you looking at? This is my work. You go to your room and do your thing." No, James is, "Hey, can I show this to other people? Can I show your work to my community? I was reading your work, and I don't think this is great. This is not great, but I want you to be known. If that's not a big contribution to the community building, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's just like his ability to help other people network to help create. We've got the Mormon Lit Blitz, but he's also been working with the literary communities in Mexico and in there in the Mormon Lit Lab as he was kind of forming that, and they started a Patreon for the Mormon Lit Blitz. He asked, contributors, well, what else would you like to see for a special contest? And so he was kind of soliciting, what else do we want to have in the Mormon literature community that we're not seeing? And several people put, where are the international voices? And James looked at that and thought, we can do this. And so he recruited translators, he recruited people to do marketing and advertise. Like, how do we find writers that are members of the church in Cape Verde? How do we find them in the Philippines? So he decided, wow, this sounds hard. Let's do it. And, so the first, there's been two around the world in Mormon literature contests. And with translations from Estonian and Tagalog and Spanish and Portuguese and Japanese and all these things. And ever since Around the World and Mormon Lit Blitz happened, then Wayfair magazine now translates. And so does Ariantum now has, and I just kind of see this sense of like, sometimes it just takes that one person to start a ripple, so he started Mormon Lit Blitz and it helped reinvigorate some of the other things like Ariantum, you know, was a great print magazine, and then it took a little bit to transition to digital. And part of that was helped by this community of writers that James had helped build. And you kind of see all these ripples, and he's not just throwing one stone that's rippling. It's like, and here's a boulder, and that's going to ripple, and here's a boulder, and I'm going to put one over there. And you guys don't know this, but this is this is a spot where Mormon literature is going to grow, and then it does. So. Any other thoughts on James with community building? Doesn't just have to be with literature.
Well, I think I first learned about Raphael's work through one of James's translations that was published in Wayfair a few years ago. And that is, I'm able to read Spanish okay, but not perfectly. And so having an English translation was really, really fantastic to introduce me to a brilliant writer that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. I'll share one story. I have a really fantastic former student of mine that graduated from BYU 2 or 3 years ago. And after she graduated, she was hired by the church history department in Salt Lake City. And to my great delight, she came under the mentorship of James there, and they've really um, developed a nice partnership and are working on a variety of things together. And one of the things that I worked hardest with that student on during her time as an undergraduate was her writing. She had such fantastic research abilities, and I wanted nothing more than for this research she was doing to be able to be read by people. And she really, really, really lacked confidence in her writing, and the transformation that has taken place since she came under kind of James's mentorship there. And this is just something he's doing quietly behind the scenes at work each day that nobody else is, publicly aware of. But it's been really, really rewarding and fantastic to see. And so he's constantly, I think, not just bringing people in, but also providing sort of behind the scenes mentoring. The fact that James is as well known as he is in the Mormon history world, I think, says something about this. That he was willing to make connections across that sort of Mormon history, Mormon literature divide, um, not just sort of bringing historical research into more accessible forms like we've talked about, but partnering with Mormon historians like Artis Partial. I think they saw the world in very similar ways, but had very distinct skill sets in terms of their understanding and approach to Mormon history. But that was a really, really fruitful collaboration. And Artis, bless her heart, was somebody that was always working on 87 things at once and was never able to sort of finish any of them. And it's largely because of James that she published some of this stuff, right? Because he saw it through. He made sure that that her research could reach a wider audience through publications like A Song of Names. And so I think this was just kind of constantly what he has been doing, and what he continues to do is find these people and bring them into sort of bigger circles, into wider audiences, and then collaborate with them when and where appropriate. And it's something that I don't know many academics that are quite as friendly and outgoing in that sense. We tend to be, and maybe literary scholars are different, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but historians are maybe not the most socially accessible individuals in the world. We kind of, like our books and like being alone in our offices. And James is really, I think he is probably that way sometimes, but he's also very outgoing and very friendly, and wants to form these friendships and relationships to to highlight and sponsor and translate and publicize others' work.
He's very generous, with both his, his abilities, his interests, the very generous with wanting to lift everyone in the community, and very generous with being able to share his kind of keen insights that he has. Well, let's move back and kind of we're moving to a close. So first, I want to ask everyone, if you were, we've got piles of books and collections and essays, and all these things that James has contributed. And if you were to give someone one work to start with, whether it could be a single poem or a poetry collection, a single essay or a whole book, whatever it is, what's a starting point that you would offer to someone, and why? Who would like to go first with this?
I can go first. For me, I was thinking about this, like, a lot of poets pass through history. Some of them have many books that make it into the record. Others, you're lucky if you get one single poem. I hope James is on the multiple books side of literary history. But if we only get one poem for him, for me, it would have to be a Prayer on the Red Sea Shore. Like, so much captured in here. If these walls of water fall, O Lord, let me drown with Moses, and let me praise you with my final breath, for lending me his mad prophetic dream, for letting me wander out past the edge of this world, beside a man who could see all the glory of Egypt and still say it wasn't enough. If these walls of water fall, O Lord, let me drown with Moses. Yes, let me die with the same fire in my eyes Moses saw in a desert bush. What I love about this poem is this is passably an atheist poem, but is also deeply, deeply faithful. This could be a poem that would say, this is my tradition and my people, and that's why I'm with them. Whether this man actually is a prophet and whether he has the power to hold these walls of water up doesn't matter to me. These are my people. I claim them. They are mine. But at the same time, it's someone who deeply believes the fire in Moses' eyes and the fire that he could pass on to him. And this captures so much of who he is as a writer, and so much of what he has to give, not just to Latter-day Saint letters, but to the world today. That's my vote.
I love that. Okay, do we have another offering?
Yeah,
Christopher.
absolutely. I would recommend, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. I would recommend this 2024 essay published in Wayfair, How Do We Live with the Past? A Meditation on Nostalgia. This obviously appeals to me for obvious reasons as a historian. It's a really, really smart, reflective piece on the meanings of the past, the way that we remember, how that lines up beside what actually happened, and sort of the uses of the past. And he talks about the opening of the archives over the last several decades. He talks about episodes in Latter-day Saint history, but it's really a great essay to get people thinking um, about the past, about history, about the study of history, and about its meanings. So that would be the one that I would recommend.
Okay, Raphael.
Well, it's hard for me because I am so uh, like thinking as a publisher. I want all of the work of the James's work to be given to the Spanish audience, the Spanish language audience. It's like something that comes from this kind of urgency. But if I could do that, I'd start with the 5 books of Jesus. They are of a great beauty. It's a beauty that makes people cry. You know, that deep beauty and literary beauty and spiritual beauty, and it's light. It's pure light, and it's a work like no other one about Jesus Christ. And it's from this era, from this century, from these years, and he's a that's the work I'd start with.
Okay, so yeah, for you, you want the ball for everyone, but that's the one you would start with if you could have it in Spanish and available for everyone. I was gonna go with 5 books of Jesus as well, so but I'll read a little quote from it. This is kind of near the beginning of the Savior's ministry, and I'll just read a couple paragraphs. That's when they begin to come to him, the wounded, the haunted, the ones who live off desperate hope alone. They don't know exactly who he is and can't explain to their own minds quite why they believe so fully that he can change them. But they come. They build up their courage and walk up to him. They open mouths which feel dry all at once to tell him why they have to see him, to tell him things aren't all right, that they're doing the best they can to go on, but it's hard, it's very hard, and please, if he wants to, he can help them. And whenever he looks at them, it's like cool, sweet water because the first miracle is that they feel for the first time in so long that they are understood, that he knows the shapes of the scars on their hearts, that they don't have to excuse themselves for having come. Then he reaches out and touches them, and their demons flee or their limbs gain sudden strength, and their desperate hope transforms into wild, euphoric confidence. They want to shout and scream and dance all at once. But he pulls them aside and says, "Shh, your faith has healed you. That's all. There's no need to mention me to anyone." Well, I just think there is so much. Basically, if you're watching this panel, you should indulge. Choose your starting point, whether it's the essays or the poetry or his fiction. But once you get started, you will not be able to stop on the works of James Goldberg. What do you guys hope to see from James Goldberg in the years to come? Anyone? Like what do we want next from James? Or what do we hope or what are we sure that he's going to keep doing for us as a literary
James's work in Spanish.
Okay, so that's
All
what
of
we
it.
want. That is what we want. We need James's work translated.
I've been asking somebody for years to write a campus novel set on at BYU or at a fictional version of BYU, and I think James is probably the person that can make that happen.
Okay, so we have specific requests. We'll take any fiction because it'll be amazing. But if you could make a specific request, that would be it. Ed.
Just thinking back to again, since Vermont and the Joseph Smith birthplace are on my mind, maybe James can be one of these church history tour givers in a transformative way. Not to downplay the people that have put so much time and energy into the church history tours or Book of Mormon land tours that they give. But can you imagine standing in the Kirtland Temple with James and hearing him tell stories? I'd see angels. I'd see angels if I was there with James.
I mean, I think I want to see him keep fostering these communities, and I want to see him, though, guarding his writing time. I want to make and saying for some of these things have had a much bigger audience than other things, but some of these things that might have only been read by a couple hundred people because it's a small poetry thing in a small anthology or whatever, or some of these things that have been read by tens of thousands of people, they all are adding something. They are all speaking something that no one else could tell. So I hope he keeps guarding his writing time so that way whatever it is he wants to produce, that he will create it and give it to us. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ed and Christopher and Raphael. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you guys about James's work. And for those listening, you can fully see why James is the recipient of the 2026 Smith-Pettit Foundation Award for Outstanding Contribution to Mormon Letters.